been a long time since I've had a 1-star book. Got one today, dagnabbit. Hey Booktube, it's Kim at middle of the book march. This is my bookish week for Saturday, August 6th. Oh, let's see. I think all weekend we're gonna stay inside. It's hot. It's supposed to be rainy, thunderstormy. I have plenty of cleaning to do to keep me busy and plenty of reading, so I may ignore the cleaning and just keep reading. I don't know. I really shouldn't, because that tends to be habitual for me. So I need to address the cleaning sometime. It'll be this weekend. So nice coolness inside of the house. I will avoid the outdoors this weekend. So I've got quite a bit to talk about. So let me get rolling here so I'm not wasting too much time yammering. Okay, I have 4 books I wanted to talk to you about. One of them I finished previous to this week, but it was my book group pick. And we had book group Friday last night, and so I can talk to you about this one. And then I have 3 additional books that I finished. The book group pick was the 1-star book. I have been waiting and waiting to talk about how crappy I thought this book was. And here you go. You're welcome. This is The 100-Year-Old Man Who Climbed Out of the Window and Disappeared by Jonas Jonasson. And this was translated from the Swedish by Rod Bradbury in 2012. So I read it. I kind of jumped back and forth between audio and my Kindle. And the audio narrator was pretty good. He was a very good reader, put, kind of emotion and thought into the narration. This book sucked. If you've loved this book, I'm sorry, but it just fucking sucked. It was one of the worst books I have read in years. The only reason I mostly finished it was because it was for my book group, and I am a healthy DNFer. I have no qualms about DNFing a book, and I've kind of looked back at my book group books, and I've kind of DNF'd too many, I think. So I wanted to finish this so I could discuss it. Oh, but it was awful. And I read most of it. I read 50% of it with audio and Kindle, and then the last half of it I skim read through my Kindle, and the last 2 or 3 chapters I just went online and I looked at the summary and I read the last couple of chapters. This book was awful. This is the story of Alan, who is a 100-year-old man in a care home in Sweden. And it's his birthday. It's his 100th birthday, and the staff at the home wants to throw him a party. So they're getting ready for the party. They've got the cake. They've got everything ready to go. And they go and try to find Alan and bring him to the party, and he has escaped his room out of the window. And he took off wearing his slippers. So it's kind of a comedy of errors. The book is supposed to be humorous and cute and clever, and it basically read like a Swedish Forrest Gump. He is a very old man who has a very colorful past. And what basically happens is Jonasson wrote his backstory. So we flip back and forth in time between the present, after he's jumped out the window on the first floor, after he's escaped out the window of his care home, and who he meets along the way, how he gets further and further away. And then it goes back in time to talk about his early life as a young man. He goes through all of history, European and American, and back to European, of all of these historical characters that he met in his life. He was in the military, and he was basically an explosives expert. So the book flips back and forth in time, and it was just crappy. It was awful. It was almost like trying to be too cute and trite, and trying to be clever with the historical figures that this man Alan kind of ran into. Coincidentally, give me a friggin' break. The writing was just fine. It was plain, regular writing, nothing special, nothing colorful, nothing to set it apart from any other contemporary, regular old novel. And I just thought it was stupid and silly. So again, this is all my opinion. If you love the book, I apologize if I've offended anybody, but this book sucked, and I hate it. I hated it. There are probably 4 of us from the book group, the Critical Chicks, who post on Goodreads pretty regularly, and the 4 of us who posted gave it either a 1-star or a 2-star to be generous. So it was awful, and I couldn't stand it. It was too trying to cleverize itself, and it was just silly and pointless, so I hated it. Very glad I didn't buy the physical copy. So the next 3 books had much better time with, and I'm still thinking about all of them. So I'm going to go in order of how much I liked them. This one is Once There Were Wolves by Charlotte McConaughey. She is an Australian author, and her debut novel was Migrations. This is her her sophomore novel, and this is the story of Inti, who has a twin sister, Aggie. And Inti is a wildlife wolf biologist and wolf researcher. She has grown up with divorced parents or separated parents. I don't know if they were ever married. But her father lives in Canada out in the wilderness, and he is a kind of a survivalist and lives completely off-grid off the land. And their mother is a crime investigator or detective of some sort, and she basically researches and looks into serious crimes, serial killers, murderers, that type of thing. So she investigates those. Very different parents. And so the 2 girls, the twin girls, at one point have been raised by their mother, and then as they got a little older, they went to live with their father out in the woods. And that's where Inti developed her love of wildlife and the outdoors and forestry and that type of thing. Eventually, Inti goes for her education, her PhD, and she is the head of a research team that travels to Scotland to rewild wolves. And they bring a few small packs of wolves that they want to reintroduce into the wild of Scotland to see if they will form packs and surviving packs and cut down on the deer population, which is completely out of control and is preventing plant life in trees to grow, which is ultimately what they're looking to do. Now, what I did not realize when I picked it up, but it's somewhat of a love story. It is a story of deep family secrets. It's a story of violence, so there are very strong trigger warnings in the book for domestic abuse, domestic violence, rape, physical abuse. There are depictions and descriptions of violence against animals. So it's not the best book for a sensitive reader, a person sensitive to all of those things. But the book stuck with me because McConaughey's description of wolves and wolf life is extraordinary. I absolutely loved reading about the wolves. And the story surrounding the people was there are times it got a little far-fetched. It's like, what? I don't think so. Or you expect me to believe this, or you expect me to think that that's how the story's going to go. It's like, but hey, once I got over myself and kept reading, because the book kept my interest, I really enjoyed it. I thought that there were twists that I was never expecting. It's a combination of a love story, a crime story, a mystery, reading about all of this happening in remote areas of the world, whether it's Alaska, Canada, Scotland, the Scottish Highlands. There are conversations about married life and Aggie and Inti, who are identical twins, and they profess to each other that they'll always stay together. So one of them gets married, and then it's like the dynamic has to change. But there's so many things that swirl around each of those issues. And it was just a really interesting story. It was a very quick read, quite short, and I really enjoyed this. If you've read Migrations, you'll know that McConaughey, I think it's McConaughey, is an environmentalist, activist, and advocate, and she is quite interested and aggressively interested in climate change and the environmental world and conservation and that type of thing. So both of her books so far are very heavy in those topics and that atmosphere and the conversation running throughout each novel. And I enjoyed both of them. This is my favorite so far. I really loved it. The third book I want to talk to you about was a buddy read. My friend Britta and I are doing an Irish women's author project, and we read Tana French, The Searcher. Now, this is a standalone Tana French novel. It is not part of the Dublin Murder Squad series, but it's a really interesting glimpse into who Tana French is as a writer. This is the story of Cal, who is a self-retired ex-Chicago police officer who has moved to a remote village in Ireland to escape his life. And he buys this dilapidated house in the Irish countryside, in this little farming village. And he's basically, all he wants to do is escape from people, leave his old life, renovate this house, live in it, and do as much as he can in isolation and quiet and tranquility. Well, that's not what he gets. He's kind of going in and he's starting to renovate this house. He is clearing out garbage. He is fixing old furniture. And after a little while, he realizes he's being watched. And he's trying to figure out, how do I catch this person who's watching me or observing me? And it's basically all of his spidey senses are kind of tingling because he doesn't really see evidence of being watched. But being a Chicago cop for so long, he has that intuition. And he's also waiting for his Irish firearms license, because traveling from the U.S. to Ireland, you can't just bring a gun and you can't just buy a gun whenever you want. It's not the USA, people. So he's waiting for a license to own a rifle. So he doesn't feel as secure as he would like. Come to find out, he is being watched. And the person who is watching him is a 13-year-old child. And that's right on the dust jacket. This is where the story gets super interesting. And it's a crime mystery. It's a slow burn of a novel, slow plot. This is not a book if you want to read a super fast-paced crime mystery, twists and turns everywhere. There are several twists and turns that are very subtle, that go right along with the story and where French is taking you as a writer. And I loved the book. Britta and I both loved it. It's a little long, and there are times when it's like, all right, that's unnecessary. There are certain characters that really didn't add to the story. There was certain things that I was like, wait a minute, that wouldn't happen that way. Or wait a minute, people wouldn't say that. But there were enough secrets and discoveries and revelations in the story that it just, this is a 450-page book, and I read it in 2 days. Britta and I were going to take a week to do our buddy read. We both took 2 days and just couldn't stop talking about it. There is a lot that she says in here so smoothly. She addresses the question or the concept of gender in a really interesting way, which I loved. And she talks a lot about political correctness and woke culture. Those were the times when it's like, oh, that's getting a little preachy. I really don't need to read that in this particular story, but those times are spare and far between. So the actual story, really interesting. I loved the setting. What Tana French does so well is she writes atmosphere fantastically. And even in the other books of hers I've read in the Dublin Murder Squad series, the atmosphere is so strong. And I loved it. Her sentence structure, the words that she uses, her writing is so liquid and transitional. You don't even realize that she's doing it for you in her writing. She just carries you through the story. And by the end of the book, I was like, that was so satisfying of a novel. And this is not a book that will get you to the end with a happily ever after or a climax or a resolution to the mystery that's all tied up in a nice, neat little bow. It's not that type of a book. But it's so interesting, so well done, and I loved it. The last book I finished was Finding Me by Viola Davis. And I listened to this on audio. This is my 5-star read of the week, and this is her memoir. She narrates the audiobook and is so friggin' incredible. there were so many times when she made me cry, and I was listening to this in the car, so I have to be careful with, you know, oh, do I have to pause it? Do I have to pull over and ugly cry? But she is a phenomenal, I don't know if you like Viola Davis as an actor, but her voice is so powerful, so strong and rich, and she narrates her story, and she puts all of the emotion behind it. She is telling us her story as if it was actually happening in real time. It's harrowing. She comes from a childhood of abject poverty, physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, anything you could possibly think of, on top of being a dark-skinned black girl. And there were so many things that wrapped together for her, and so many ways that she communicated that to me as the reader slash listener. She talks about her entire childhood, how she got from that horrifying background to her young adulthood, to her acting career, how she escaped poverty. And this is not a stereotypical how a famous person escaped their poor life and succeeded in happily ever after. It's not that. She is extremely self-deprecating. There are so many moments in the book where she has literally zero self-esteem, is living with an enormous amount of shame. She comes to so many realizations about herself along the way. And even when we get to the end of the book and she's talking about her career and the awards and the accolades, she still talks about the dysfunction in her family that she continues to deal with. It was incredible. And it is not a tell-all celebrity memoir. She does talk a lot about some of the other actors and professional people she worked with on certain films and certain shows, and that was all really interesting to me. There's so much in there about Meryl Streep, which I loved. She was talking about the movie Doubt that they both starred in, and I just ate this book up. The end of it was so powerful and emotional. I can't recommend this enough. Please, if you're going to read it, consume it from audio. It is beautiful. Those are the books I finished. What am I currently reading? Now, August is Women in Translation. I have come back to the Books of Jacob by Olga Tokarczuk, translated from the Polish by Jennifer Croft. I am going between audio, ebook, physical book. This is a behemoth, and it's physically heavy. It is so heavy I can't really read it unless I'm sitting at the table. But I have gone back to this book for August, and I'm hoping I can finish the whole book. And I might be able to pick up some other books by women in translation. I am also reading When I Hit You by Nina Kandasamy, and it's The Portrait of the Writer as a Young Wife. This is an autobiographical novel about a woman who very quickly falls in love and gets married to a college professor, and is only married for a month before she realizes he is a scary man, and she's being physically and mentally and emotionally abused repeatedly. She kind of rushed into a relationship looking for her one true love, and eventually found this man who is a communist college professor. And at first she was extremely respectful and admired him, but then too quickly realized he was not the person who she believed him to be. So very big triggers for domestic violence, domestic abuse, manipulation, narcissism, all of that stuff. And I am about to embark on a buddy read with Shelly Swearingen, our very first one. Next week, I'm going to pick up This Tender Land by William Kent Kruger. William Kent Kruger is a really awesome author. He's written an entire crime thriller series. And let me see, Cork O'Connor mystery series. He's got prolific books in that series. He wrote a book called Ordinary Grace that I absolutely loved. We read that for the Critical Chicks book group. And Shelly and I are going to read this starting next week, and I'm really looking forward to that. That's it. That's a lot. So I'm going to end it now. Let me know in the comments below what you think of any of the books or anything I talked about, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, everybody.